The rain poured relentlessly, drenching the empty streets as Emily gripped the steering wheel, her breath shallow and uneven. She had followed Daniel for miles, a knot in her stomach growing tighter with each turn. Emily whispered, "Please, let me be wrong." Her car came to a sudden stop near a dimly lit park. Through the haze of rain, she saw Daniel emerge from the shadows, his hand entwined with Olivia's. Emily's world froze. The two laughed softly, completely unaware of her gaze. Tears blurred her vision as betrayal seared her heart. The air seemed to crackle as Daniel leaned closer to Olivia, whispering something that made her smile. Emily's pulse roared in her ears as she stumbled out of the car. Daniel said, "You mean everything to me." Emily's voice trembled. "How could you, Daniel?" But her words were swallowed by the storm. In that instant, she realized her family was built on lies. Emily slammed the door behind her, breath ragged as she leaned against the wall. The storm's echoes still roared in her ears. Her mind replayed the scene over and over, each memory cutting deeper. She whispered, "No, it can't be true." She paced the living room, clutching her chest, her heartbeat thundering. Emily collapsed onto the couch, hugging a pillow as if it could protect her from the truth. Daniel had always been her safe place, the man she trusted most. Now every smile, every word felt poisoned. She stared at the family photos on the wall, tears spilling freely. The room seemed smaller, suffocating, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Emily whispered again, "Why would they do this to me?" But the silence gave no answer. Emily sat at the edge of the bed, gripping her phone tightly. "There has to be an explanation," she muttered. She scrolled through old messages from Daniel, rereading his words as if they could undo what she saw. Her breath quickened. Every memory of their life together flashed before her: wedding vows, shared laughter, quiet mornings. Emily shook her head violently. "No, Daniel loves me. Olivia is just a friend," she said, almost pleading. She clutched her phone to her chest, rocking slightly. Her eyes burned as exhaustion overtook her, but her mind refused to rest. She stared into the darkness, clinging to denial like a lifeline. The house was eerily quiet. Emily sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched dinner she had made hours ago. The clock ticked loudly, each second stretching endlessly. She whispered, "Where are you, Daniel?" Her voice trembled as she traced circles on the table with her fingertip. "Oh." Outside, the storm had passed, leaving only stillness. She glanced toward the front door, half expecting it to open, but nothing happened. Emily's stomach twisted. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but fear kept her frozen. The silence pressed in around her, heavy and suffocating. The door finally opened, and Daniel stepped inside, dripping from the storm. Emily's heart leapt, but suspicion burned hotter than relief. "Where were you?" she demanded, voice sharp. Daniel froze, then forced a smile. "Working late," he replied too quickly. Emily's eyes narrowed. "In the middle of a storm," she pressed. Daniel dropped his keys, avoiding her gaze. "You're overthinking again," he muttered, moving past her. Emily stood rooted in place, her pulse hammering. The first cracks had formed, and deep down she knew they would only grow. Morning light filtered through the kitchen blinds as Emily forced a smile while pouring coffee. Lucas chatted about school, his voice lively and innocent. Emily replied softly, trying to hide the storm inside her. Daniel entered, kissing Emily's cheek. She flinched slightly, but said nothing. Lucas laughed, telling a silly joke that made Daniel chuckle. Emily watched them, her chest tightening as if she were an outsider in her own family. She whispered, "We should do this more often," her voice cracking. Daniel nodded, distracted, while Lucas devoured his breakfast. For a fleeting moment, the scene felt normal, almost perfect. But beneath the surface, tension simmered, invisible yet sharp. Emily stirred her coffee slowly, her thoughts miles away. Later that morning, Emily packed Lucas's lunch while Daniel scrolled on his phone. "You're quiet today," she said cautiously. Daniel shrugged without looking up. Lucas entered, humming, oblivious to the strained air. Emily forced a cheerful tone, telling Lucas to grab his backpack. As he left, Daniel muttered, "You worry too much." Emily froze, her back to him, biting her lip. She asked, "Is there something you want to tell me?" Daniel finally met her eyes, his expression unreadable. "No," he said flatly. The word lingered, cold and heavy. Emily's stomach turned as doubt gnawed at her heart. The silence between them was louder than any argument. Emily sat across from Olivia at their favorite cafe, stirring her tea nervously. "I saw something last night," Emily whispered, eyes darting around the room. Olivia leaned forward, feigning concern. "What happened?" she asked gently. Emily swallowed hard, voice trembling. "Daniel. He's been acting strange. I don't know what to think anymore." Olivia reached across the table, squeezing Emily's hand. "You're probably overthinking," she said with a soothing smile. Emily sighed, desperate to believe her. "I just need someone to be honest with me," Emily murmured. Olivia's gaze flickered with hidden guilt, but she quickly masked it. "I'm here for you," she replied, words heavy with deception. Emily nodded, clinging to the false comfort. Emily returned home and busied herself with chores, scrubbing counters and folding laundry. The repetitive motions dulled her thoughts, offering brief escape. She hummed softly, pretending for a moment that everything was normal. Daniel's laughter drifted faintly from the living room where he spoke on the phone. Emily paused, listening, her heart skipping. The tone was light, almost playful. She clenched her fists, then forced herself to resume cleaning. "Focus," she whispered, as if scolding herself. When Lucas came home, Emily greeted him with a warm hug, burying her fear beneath a bright smile. For a fleeting moment, life seemed ordinary again, but it was only an illusion. That evening, Emily found Daniel's jacket draped carelessly on a chair. She picked it up, shaking her head at his forgetfulness. A folded piece of paper slipped from the pocket. Emily frowned, unfolding it to reveal a receipt from a hotel. Her chest tightened. The date was last night. Her hands trembled as she stared at the proof of betrayal. Daniel entered the room suddenly, making her jump. "What's that?" he asked sharply. Emily quickly hid the paper behind her back. "Nothing," she said too quickly. Daniel's eyes narrowed, suspicion flashing in his gaze. Emily forced a smile, but inside, panic surged. The fragile illusion of trust began to crack wide open. The storm raged again that night as Emily frantically dialed Daniel's number. Lucas had fallen at soccer practice and needed urgent care. The phone rang endlessly, unanswered. "Pick up, Daniel," Emily cried, pacing the hospital hallway. Her pulse pounded with fear and anger. A nurse walked past, offering a sympathetic glance. Emily sank into a chair, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Lucas groaned softly from the exam room, his voice weak. Emily whispered, "I'm here, baby. I'm not leaving you." She tried again, her thumb trembling over the call button, but still no response. As the clock ticked past midnight, dread settled deep in her chest. Daniel wasn't just busy. He was choosing to stay away. Back home, Emily sat on the edge of the bed, Daniel's phone clutched tightly in her hand. He had left it charging on the nightstand while he showered. Her heart thudded in her ears. "Don't do this," she whispered, but her thumb slid across the screen. A flood of messages appeared. At first, mundane words. Then, she saw Olivia's name. Emily's breath caught. The texts were intimate, filled with affection and plans. Her vision blurred with tears as she scrolled. Each message felt like a dagger. A photo appeared, Daniel and Olivia, laughing in a hotel room. Emily's sob caught in her throat. The truth was undeniable now. A hollow silence filled the room as her world collapsed further. When Daniel emerged from the shower, Emily stood frozen, phone in hand. "How long has this been going on?" she demanded, voice trembling. Daniel blinked, startled. "What are you talking about?" he asked sharply. Emily hurled the phone onto the bed. "Don't play dumb, Olivia. The messages, the photos, everything." Daniel's face went pale, then hardened. You went through my phone? You're paranoid. Emily's breath came in ragged bursts. I needed the truth, and now I have it. Daniel grabbed his shirt, avoiding her gaze. You're twisting things, he said coldly. Emily's heart shattered at his refusal to confess. The room buzzed with rage and heartbreak, the silence after her words deafening. Emily met Olivia at the cafe, her hands shaking as she wrapped them around a steaming cup. I found out, Olivia, she whispered, her voice breaking. Olivia's eyes widened in feigned shock. Found out what? She asked, feigning innocence. Emily's tears spilled freely. Daniel has been lying. I saw the messages. The hotel. Olivia reached over, grasping Emily's trembling hands. Emily, maybe there's an explanation, she said softly, concealing her guilt behind a mask of concern. Emily looked at her desperately. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Olivia nodded sympathetically, her own heartbeat pounding with fear of exposure. She knew the web of lies was unraveling fast. At dinner, Lucas sat quietly as Emily and Daniel exchanged curt, sharp words. You're late again, Emily said coldly. Daniel stabbed at his food without looking up. Work ran over, he muttered. Lucas glanced between them, confused. Can we not fight? He asked softly. Emily's heart ached at her son's plea, but the pain boiled over. I can't keep pretending this is normal, she shouted. Daniel slammed his fork down, glaring. You're tearing this family apart with your paranoia. Lucas pushed back his chair, tears welling in his eyes. He whispered, please stop, before rushing to his room. Emily sank into her seat, trembling. The fragile shell of their family was breaking beyond repair. Emily sat alone in her car outside Sarah's small house, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. She hadn't spoken to her mother in months, but tonight she needed answers. Sarah opened the door, her face lined with worry. Emily, what's wrong? She asked gently. Emily collapsed into her arms, sobbing. Everything is falling apart. Daniel, Olivia. They've been lying to me. Sarah guided her to the couch, eyes filled with pain. There's something I've been hiding too, she said quietly. Emily looked up, stunned. Sarah's voice trembled. Daniel isn't just your husband. He's tied to our past in ways you don't know. Emily's breath caught, a chilling realization creeping in. Sarah whispered, I should have told you years ago. The world shifted beneath Emily's feet. Emily sat on Sarah's couch, clutching her phone after Sarah's confession. Her hands shook as she dialed her aunt's number, needing confirmation. The call connected, and a weary voice answered. Emily? Emily's voice cracked. Please, just tell me the truth. Her aunt sighed heavily. Your father's past was complicated. Daniel's family, they've been entangled with ours for decades. Emily's heart pounded. Are you saying Daniel knew? Silence filled the line, broken only by her aunt's soft sob. He knew, she whispered. Emily gasped, tears streaming. The betrayal cut deeper than she'd imagined. It wasn't just an affair. It was a family secret rooted in lies. Emily's grip on the phone loosened as her world shattered again. Emily drove home in a daze, Sarah's confession and her aunt's words echoing in her mind. Memories flooded back, Daniel's cryptic comments, Sarah's hesitations, moments that never made sense. As she entered the house, she noticed an old photo on the mantel. Sarah, Daniel's parents, and Emily's late father all together, smiling. Her stomach turned. Daniel stepped into the room, startled by her sudden presence. I'm US. Emily pointed to the photo, voice trembling. How long have you known? Daniel's face went pale. Emily, it's complicated, he stammered. Rage surged through her. You've been lying to me since the day we met, she screamed. Daniel's silence was an answer she couldn't bear. Lucas stood at the top of the stairs, listening as Emily and Daniel's shouting filled the house. You've betrayed me in every way possible. Emily cried. Daniel yelled back, I was trying to protect you. Lucas' heart pounded. He rushed downstairs, tears streaming. Stop it, he shouted. Emily turned, startled. Lucas, go back to your room. Lucas shook his head violently. No, you're both lying and I deserve the truth. Daniel reached for him, but Lucas jerked away. I hate this family, he screamed before storming out the front door. Emily collapsed onto the stairs, sobbing. Daniel stood frozen, the weight of their destruction finally visible in his trembling hands. Emily sat alone in the darkened living room, clutching the old photo. Daniel entered quietly, his face drawn and defeated. I never wanted you to find out like this, he said hoarsely. Emily's voice was raw. You married me knowing the truth. You let me believe in a life built on lies. Daniel sank into a chair, head in his hands. I thought I could protect you. And Lucas. Emily shook her head violently. No, you protected yourself. Daniel's silence confirmed everything. Emily whispered. I don't even know who you are anymore. The final wall between them crumbled. The truth wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the very foundation of her family being a carefully constructed illusion. Emily sat alone on the edge of her bed, clutching a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The house was silent, but the silence felt dangerous, like the pause before a storm. Her hands trembled as she stared at the floor. Memories of Daniel's lies swirled with Sarah's confession, her mind a whirlwind of betrayal. She whispered to herself, "This ends tonight." Emily stood slowly, her reflection in the mirror showing a woman she barely recognized, eyes red and hollow, jaws set with determination. She glanced toward Lucas's empty room, her chest aching. Tonight she would confront Daniel and Olivia, no more denial, no more silence. Emily inhaled deeply, bracing herself for the reckoning to come. The front door burst open as Emily stormed inside. Daniel and Olivia sat in the living room, their conversation dying instantly at her arrival. Emily's voice cut through the air like a blade. Enough lies. I know everything. Olivia's face blanched, while Daniel jumped to his feet. Emily, please, calm down, he begged. Emily pointed at Olivia, trembling with rage. You were supposed to be my friend. Olivia stammered. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Daniel stepped between them, desperate. We can fix this, he insisted. Emily's scream pierced the room. You destroyed me. The words silenced them all. Lucas's absence loomed like a ghost as the family imploded in the space between breaths. The fight ended abruptly, words spent like broken glass scattered across the floor. Emily sat on the couch, her body trembling, while Daniel paced in silence. Olivia stood near the doorway, eyes downcast, hands gripping her coat. No one dared speak. The weight of everything unsaid pressed on them like a physical force. Emily stared at the empty chair where Lucas once sat, her throat tightening. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, muttering, I never meant for it to get this far. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. But it did. The quiet was deafening, filled with pain too raw for words. In that silence, their family was already gone. Emily walked into Lucas's empty room, the bed neatly made, his favorite books stacked by the window. She sank to her knees, clutching his pillow, sobbing silently. Daniel appeared in the doorway, his face etched with regret. Emily, please don't do this, he said softly. She rose slowly, her tears drying into cold resolve. I have to, she whispered. Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled away. I can't live like this, not with you, not with these lies. Daniel's voice cracked. What about us? About Lucas? Emily shook her head, her heart breaking. He deserves better than this, and so do I. Her decision was final. There was no turning back now. Night had fallen when Emily stood at the doorway with her suitcase. Daniel stood frozen behind her, his face pale and desperate. Emily, please don't go, he pleaded. She turned to face him one last time, her eyes shining with sorrow and strength. You made this choice when you lied to me, she said softly. Daniel stepped forward, but Emily raised a hand to stop him. She opened the door, cool night air rushing in. For a moment she hesitated, memories of love and laughter flashing through her mind. Then she stepped out, closing the door behind her. The sound was final, like a chapter slamming shut. Outside, the world felt vast and terrifying, but it was hers. Emily sat alone in a small rented apartment, the unfamiliar walls bare and cold. The sound of a distant city street filtered through the cracked window. She stared at a photo of Lucas, tracing his face with trembling fingers. Her heart ached for him, for everything he had lost in the storm of lies. She whispered, "I'm sorry, baby," her voice breaking. The silence pressed in around her, heavy and unrelenting. Emily curled into herself on the couch, memories of the house she left behind swirling in her mind. She had walked away, but the pain followed, a shadow she couldn't shake. Tears slid silently down her cheeks as she realized she had to rebuild from nothing. Emily sat at a cafe table, nervously stirring her coffee. Across from her, Olivia was noticeably absent. Instead, her old friend Claire, someone she hadn't spoken to in years, smiled warmly. "You look like you've been through hell," Claire said softly. Emily let out a bitter laugh. That's an understatement. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to speak openly, recounting the betrayal and the lies. Claire reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You're stronger than you think, Emily." Emily's throat tightened. The words didn't fix the pain, but they offered a small piece of comfort. She realized healing didn't have to be faced alone. It could begin with a single moment of connection. Lucas sat on the edge of his bed at Daniel's house, staring at a photo of his family taken before everything fell apart. His eyes were red from crying. Daniel knocked softly on the door. "Lucas, can we talk?" Lucas didn't look up. "Why should I listen to you? You lied to Mom. You lied to me." Daniel's face crumpled. "I made mistakes, son. I thought I was protecting you." Lucas finally turned, anger flashing in his gaze. "You broke us. Nothing you say can fix that." He shoved the photo into a drawer and faced the wall. Daniel stood in the doorway, devastated, knowing his son's trust was gone. Emily stood before a mirror in her apartment, brushing her hair and staring at her reflection. The woman who looked back at her was bruised but not broken. She whispered, "You can do this." She remembered Claire's words, Lucas' face, and the pain of walking away. Each memory was a piece of the puzzle that made her stronger. Emily opened her journal and began to write, pouring her thoughts onto the page. With every word, the weight on her chest lightened slightly. For the first time since the betrayal, she felt like herself again, even if only a little. Healing wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to try. Emily walked through the park at dawn, the air cool and crisp. She inhaled deeply, letting the fresh scent of blooming flowers wash over her. Ahead, children played, their laughter a reminder of joy. She smiled faintly, clutching a small envelope in her hand, a letter she had written to Lucas. She sat on a bench and whispered, "This is for you, my love." Placing the envelope carefully beside her, she stood and walked away, not looking back. With each step, Emily felt lighter. The pain was still there, but now there was also hope. She had survived the storm, and for the first time, she believed she could rebuild. The old house stood silent, its walls echoing with memories of laughter and arguments now long gone. Emily stepped inside one last time, her footsteps soft against the worn wooden floor. She traced her fingers over the familiar furniture, each touch stirring both love and pain. The dining table where family meals once brought joy now felt like a relic of a broken past. She whispered, "This isn't my home anymore." Outside, the wind rattled the windows like a ghost refusing to leave. Emily's chest tightened, but her resolve held. She had to face this emptiness before she could truly move forward. With a final deep breath, she turned toward the door. Emily paused at the doorway, suitcase by her side. She glanced back, taking in the house one final time. Every corner held memories: Lucas' laughter, Daniel's embrace, the quiet nights she once believed were safe. A single tear slipped down her cheek as she whispered, "Goodbye." Her voice trembled, the word both a farewell and a release. Outside, the sky was painted in streaks of orange and violet, the world moving on without her. Emily closed the door softly, the click echoing like a closing chapter. She didn't look back again, her gaze fixed firmly on the uncertain road ahead. Emily's phone buzzed as she walked down the quiet street. She hesitated, then answered. A familiar voice filled her ear. Her estranged mother, Sarah. "Emily," Sarah said softly, "I'm proud of you. I know this wasn't easy." Emily's steps faltered, tears welling. "I don't feel strong," she admitted, her voice breaking. Sarah replied, "Strength isn't about never breaking. It's about standing again when you do." Emily closed her eyes, letting her mother's words wash over her. The call ended, leaving her standing in the cool evening air, clutching the phone like a lifeline. For the first time, she felt a fragile sense of hope. Later that night, Emily sat at a small cafe alone, sipping tea. Through the window, she watched people passing by, their lives untouched by her pain. She realized that while betrayal had shattered her world, it hadn't ended it. Lucas would always be her son, even if their family was fractured. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I will heal. For me. For him." The words were a promise to herself, fragile but real. When she opened her eyes, the reflection in the window showed a woman scarred but unbroken. For the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself a faint, genuine smile. Back at her apartment, Emily sat on the edge of her bed, the city's hum drifting through the open window. She picked up her journal and began to write slowly. Her words were raw, honest, and free of fear. When she finished, she closed the journal and stared at the ceiling. The silence was no longer suffocating, it was hers. Emily whispered, "I'm alone, but I'm free." The truth of her past would always hurt, but it no longer defined her. She lay back on the bed, closing her eyes, letting the weight of the night fade. The world outside continued, and for the first time, she felt ready to face it.